Good morning, Broncos country. A&J back for another Broncos talk, and in this video, we're actually going to get into the upcoming Christmas Day matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs, and really just a couple of key aspects of that. In fact, really, pretty much maybe some of the bigger key aspects going into this game. And of course, I talked a lot in the previous video, as you'll see here. You'll be getting the double upload yet again here. Definitely hate the idea of what happened to Pat Bryant during that game, but the good news is it only ended up being a concussion. Unfortunately, he won't be available on Christmas, and I think that's probably for the best. More importantly, I'm pretty sure we ought to be all right without him. We've actually had a game against the Green Bay Packers where we won without him, so I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue here. In fact, I would say that just given the lay of the land, especially with the Kansas City Chiefs themselves, I'm not going to be terribly worried about it, which is where we'll get into the first topic, being Gardner Minshew. Of course, we're all aware of the fact Patrick Mahomes is out for the remainder of the regular season and probably going into a considerable part of 2026 as well, for all we know. Really nasty ACL injury, and it seemed as though Gardner Minshew was on the verge of the same fate. It has been revealed since that he did avoid the ACL tear, but it is still an ACL injury all the same, and he won't be playing in the Christmas Day game. Probably won't be playing for the remainder of the season either, which for me, I feel as if just personally for Gardner himself, this dude has I'm not gonna lie, he's actually caught some pretty shitty breaks along the way. I mean, multiple stops from Jacksonville, Vegas. I feel like there are other ones that I should be naming, and of course, most notably Kansas City as where he's at currently. But it's really weird to see because he came out like one of those quarterbacks who was just seemingly hot out the gates, was killing it for the Jacksonville Jaguars a number of years ago, but ultimately ended up fizzling out. He's had some notable games ever since then, but really just hasn't been able to amount to anything more than a sturdy NFL backup. And to me, I was really never concerned about this game, regardless of any of the things that happened this past Sunday, especially because we dealt with them last year only as a Vegas Raider, and on two separate occasions at that. I feel like those results speak for themselves. So to expect that to have been any different down in Arrowhead, which I guess won't be Arrowhead anymore after a certain point, man, that's real wild to think about. But yeah, just any notion of him being anything of a threat kind of is laughable to me. But you definitely don't want to wish what happened to him on anybody. So hopefully he'll wind up being alright. Not really sure what his future is going to entail, but it's one less thing that we're going to have to be concerned about, not that we were to begin with. With that in mind, we do got to talk about the man that is taking his place. I introduce you to Chris Olodokun and Oladokun. I'm probably going to butcher that regardless, but I'm going to be absolutely transparent and 100 with y'all on this. I barely realized this dude even exists. I had no idea who he was. In fact, I kept checking around several different Bronco content creators. They didn't even really know who he was. In fact, so much so that I didn't hear any of them mention his name. I do know that he is a late round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in 2022. And it doesn't seem like he's seen a lot of action. Of course, he got into the game against the Titans this past Sunday after Minshew went out with his injury. And the numbers he put up were actually decent, although it was probably in short order, didn't really do a whole lot. And of course, Tennessee ended up winning that game, which is really, really wild to think about. Even with all the misfortunes the Chiefs have had going their way in recent weeks. And so much so, they've actually lost 4 consecutive games, including the first game they lost out of their bye against the Broncos. And the rain just continues to keep coming down on them. Not that I'm actually displeased by that or anything like that on a personal note, but this is going to be really, really interesting. I don't know a whole lot about this guy at all. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, especially when you, I guess, survey all of the Broncos country community. I don't know how many of us really know this dude all that well. But we're going to see him front and center on Thursday, and I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm not going to overly underestimate him, but in that same vein, my expectations in this situation aren't much different if it would have been Gardner Minshew. I see the Broncos coming in, probably at the very least beating the shit out the Chiefs. I would imagine they're going to do everything they can. Andy Reid, of course, being Andy Reid, is going to do what he can to get him best prepared for this game as possible. But for me, seeing any issues, especially after the shitter the Broncos put up on Sunday, as we'll go into here in just a moment, I just can't envision that necessarily being the case the same way. To me, the Chiefs are just absolutely outmatched. They were outmatched when Mahomes was available back a few weeks ago. This is just, this has got Christmas Massacre written all over it, or at least the potential for such, because, I mean, let's be honest, even again as they were at full strength, we still ended up beating them. It was closer than it should have been, but again, they still had Mahomes, so that shouldn't be terribly surprising. And they were coming off of a bye week, which Andy Reid is usually pretty good coming off of byes, but certainly not in this case. And as I said before, and I said this in the beginning of the season, even before the season started, I expected this to be a down year. This wound up going a lot more haywire than I actually anticipated for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm actually here for it. Who am I kidding? But anyway, we're going to move right along, and we're actually going to talk about the Broncos defense, namely Dre Greenlaw. And actually, I wanted to talk about Nick Bonito as well, but unfortunately, we won't be having Dre Greenlaw available on Thursday night for the fact that he did actually suffer a hamstring injury towards the end of the aforementioned Jacksonville game. And of course, needless to say, it just was a matter of anything that could go wrong absolutely did go wrong, and it was really just a bad day. But I'm really willing to chalk that up to being now a mere bag of shells. I don't really see at this point where there's anything I see with the Chiefs that lends me to believe there are going to be any issues. Could that be something of a trap game for us? Sure, but I'm doubtful of it because, again, things are coming apart. Even for as bad as things may seem right now for the Broncos, and I'm not even sure that they're all that bad right now. In fact, if anything, much like a lot of people in the Broncos country community, this is just something, when it comes to the Jaguars loss, that I see nothing more than a wake-up call. I really feel as if that was something that the Broncos absolutely needed, especially being a considerably young team when you get to thinking about it. I feel like the oldest dude on the team for the Broncos is probably 32, I think. I haven't really checked that, but I mean, you got an awful lot of young players on this team, and they've been performing incredibly well outside of Sunday, so I'm not really all that concerned. And of course, Nick Bonito pointed it out. He played like ass, and really, so did everybody else on the team for the most part. The defense missed an awful lot of tackles. There, I talked about the refs in the previous video, but we can't let that be an issue because that isn't something that we hadn't overcome prior to Sunday. I love that I know how to talk right now. But even for all this happening, I don't really think that I'm overly concerned when it comes to this game. Again, as I've said before, my greater concerns lie with the Los Angeles Chargers right now in that season finale here in Denver. And again, I feel like that's likely going to become the Sunday night game. I'm going to take a step back on that because there's a good chance it could end up being Steelers Ravens, depending on how all that unfolds. But I'm banking on it being Chargers Broncos. We'll find out about that. But either way, I feel like this game against the Chiefs should still end up being a win. No real major concerns going into it outside of what's already been mentioned. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think about that, amongst other things down below. Y'all know how this works. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. And, of course, this has been your time with A&J, and I appreciate you spending it with me.